Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to the latest episode of my alphabet of favourite films. This is the letter I. I don't think there actually was that many, but as usual, I perhaps got a little bit carried away. Again, if you haven't seen any of the other episodes, this is essentially just a short list of some of my favourite films that one day I will do a top 150 or so films, and this is essentially a short list. So please leave in the comments below your favourite films beginning with I. It's one of the best things about doing this is seeing other people's lists, because no doubt there's films that I haven't seen that I should see, or there's films that I've just completely forgotten about. So without further ado, I'll try not to make the video too long. We'll start with Takashi Miike's Ichi the Killer. If you've never seen a Takashi Miike film, this is one of the ones to check out. It's, as usual for Miike, it's a simple story about a gangster or a gang boss who goes missing, and his lieutenant, who's desperate to find him, and played by Tabanano Sano, and he comes face to face with Ichi the Killer, who kills people for rather bizarre reasons. He's being egged on by a criminal mastermind. There's a whole S&M thing going on. It's extreme. It's not for the faint of heart. This is an uncut version, so there is kind of strong scenes of torture. But in the usual Takashi Miike bizarre form of alchemy, in the end it's actually quite moving. Or maybe it's just me. I think it's based on a manga, and it's completely barking, as you would expect with Takashi Miike, but it's one of these films that you just need to see because it's quite colourful, shall we say. Next on the list is another Japanese film, slightly different. It's Akira by Kurosawa. This is one of Kurosawa's masterpieces. If you are only familiar with Kurosawa through his Chanbara or his Jaideki films, his action samurai films, this one might surprise you. This is a quietly devastating little film about a bureaucrat played by Takeshi Shimura, who gives a towering performance, who is diagnosed with cancer, and at first he just desperately wants to cling on to some form of life, so he follows about a young girl, a colleague of his, and then he meets a writer, and he just wants to kind of experience life that he hasn't actually had, because he's one of those people that just goes to work every day and just the boring mundane ritual like we all do, and then he kind of focuses on trying to do one last thing before he dies, trying to achieve something, as in getting a child's playground built. The second half of the film is told in flashbacks from his colleagues at his funeral, and we learn how he achieves his goal. It's just a wonderful film, shot beautifully, performed beautifully, and Kurosawa understands perfectly, when people die, we always kind of take stock and go, I'm going to do things differently and I'm going to take stock of my life. But as his colleagues all say at the funeral, this is a great example and we're all going to change. And of course nobody changes. They just go on with the mundane and the routine. It's a wonderful film. It's a stupendous performance by Takeshi Shimura, and it's one of Kurosawa's essential works. Next on the list is Powell and Pressburger's I Know Where I'm Going, which is kind of the last one of their masterpieces not to be on Blu-ray for some reason. I'm not quite sure. This is a Criterion DVD. Michael Powell being a man of contradictions, the English gentleman, but loved the Scottish Highlands. The music from I Know Where I'm Going was played at his funeral because it was his favourite piece of music. It's just a wonderful tale of Wendy Hiller going up north to be married, and she kind of gets intoxicated by the islands. And by Roger Livesey. It's just a wonderful film. It's another Powell and Pressburger masterwork. And again, I'm not sure why this isn't on Blu-ray yet, but hopefully it's just a matter of time. It's a great wee film. Next on the list is the first Infernal Affairs, as opposed to Internal Affairs with Richard Gere. The second film's very good too. The third one's okay, but it's really for Infernal Affairs. It's one of Tony Leung's best performances. This was the film that Scorsese's The Departed butchered. Because there's quite a lot of cop films that we see the cop goes undercover in the gang world, but this one had the double twist of there's a mole from the police in the gang world and there's also a mole from the gang world in the police department, and obviously the tension just ratchets up as both of them get closer and closer to being exposed. This is a beautiful film, stylishly made, well acted, intelligent, pretty much everything that The Departed wasn't, and it's well worth checking out. The other two are well worth checking out as well, but the first one is quite sublime. Next on the list, it's another Criterion. It's Nicholas Ray's In a Lonely Place with Humphrey Bogart and Gloria Graham. It's one of Bogart's rawest, almost naked performances as an alcoholic Hollywood screenwriter with a bit of a temper, and a murder happens with somebody that he spent some time with, and he gets involved and embroiled and framed or suspected in the killing. It's one of the most black and white films, if that makes any sense. The cinematography is beautiful, Bogart's fantastic, and it's bitter and cynical, and it's just wonderful. It's from 1950 and it's stonkingly good. Moving on, we have a film that I did a random review of quite recently, because it was arguably one of the best films in the last 20 years that I've seen. It's Denis Villeneuve's Incendies. This is the Plain Archive edition. It's such an amazingly good film. There's not too many modern films that I go radio gaga about, but this one is just so good. It's intelligent, thought-provoking, about the effects of war on families, and it's just stunning. Like all of his films, it's beautifully shot. It's well acted. This was his last kind of French-Canadian film before he went to Hollywood. It's stunning. If you haven't seen it before, try and check it out. I would be interested to hear what you think of it, because I was just blown away by it. I'm going to have to rewatch it, because I think it is a film that demands kind of rewatching, because there's little nuances that you'll just get the more times you watch it. Fantastic. Incendies. Next on the list is something a little bit different. It's Inferno by Dario Argento. Not his most popular film, I don't think, but again, I'm weird, because my favourite one's still The Bird with Crystal Plumage, just because it was the first one, and the kind of central story in that one is just so unique and clever. Inferno is quite barking, doesn't really make a lot of sense, but there's just wonderful set pieces. It is part of the Suspiria Inferno Phenomena trilogy, and it's just gloriously demented, colourful, beautiful, and pyrotechnically impressive. Inferno. Next on the list is another Criterion, The In-Laws, with Alan Arkin and Peter Falk. I didn't actually realise this existed. I didn't realise it had been remade with Michael Douglas, even though I haven't seen that one. This is from 1979. It's one of those 70s films that just reeks of the 70s, and it's wonderful because of it. Again, it's a bit rough around the edges, but there's just classic banter with Falk and Alan Arkin. The serpentine scene is just wonderful as they're trying to evade bullets. It's just high farce, and it's just wonderful. If this doesn't put a smile on your face, I don't know what will. That's The In-Laws. Next on the list is a British classic, The Innocents by Jack Clayton, starring the wonderful Deborah Kerr. And this is one of the great ghost stories, based on Henry James' Turn of the Screw. The cinematography in it is wonderful. There's things in the corners and the background of frames that you'll kind of think, did you imagine that, or is it really there? It stands up to repeated viewings. Deborah Kerr as a governess who are looking after two really creepy children, and it's just wonderful. It's from 1961, so it's, I was going to say it's fairly recent, but it's not as old as it appears to be. It's fairly modern, you know, it was 1961, and the subtext going on are quite dark and creepy, and the whole film's dark and creepy. Next is one of those strange things we call DVDs. It's Innocent Moves. This is a strange little film because it's about chess. It's about a small boy who plays chess. Joe Mantegna is his father, who ends up being more and more competitive. It has William H. Macy in it. It has Ben Kingsley as a rather strict and serious chess teacher. And it's just a lovely little film. Again, I don't know whether it is available on Blu-ray. Let me know if it is. There's not much to say about it. Larry Fishburne's also in it as well as a street chess player. Yeah, it's just a film about a young boy and chess, but it's oddly compelling, and it's just got an excellent cast. It's from 1993. I think it was also known as Searching for Bobby Fischer, the famous US chess master who vanished for a number of years. And it's just a very interesting little film. Next on the list is The Insider by Michael Mann. Only Michael Mann could make a film. It's about 2.5 hours long, and it is essentially about the tobacco companies lying to their customers as far as, tobacco's not bad for you, and a whistleblower played by a very dowdy, overweight, confused Russell Crowe, and Al Pacino in a fairly reserved performance, playing a journalist from 60 Minutes who tries to get his story, and the courts and tobacco companies try and stop them telling the story. And again, it's only Michael Mann could make this, because not much happens, it's pretty much all talking. But again, Mann's use of architecture, his use of sound design, his use of framing and compositions and objects and people in the frame make it absolutely riveting. The score's wonderful as well. It's kind of Michael Mann's kind of forgotten excellent film. And again, nobody apart from Michael Mann could make this and make it as good as it is. There's excellent support work by Lindsay Krause and Christopher Plummer. And it's just such a rich and beautiful film. Even though, quote unquote, not much happens, it's just wonderful. See it in the big screen like all Michael Mann films, it's beautiful. Next on the list, it's another Criterion. It's Insomnia. This is the original in Norwegian with Stellan Skarsgård before he was famous and unleashed his children on Hollywood. Again, this was remade by Christopher Nolan with Al Pacino and Martin Donovan and Robin Williams, which was okay, but they kind of changed some key elements in the film. Not surprising, the original is better, just about a city cop going up north where it's 24 hours of sunlight and getting involved in a murder case and also getting involved in a murder case of his own. It's cool, it's detached, it's beautifully shot. It's a great performance by Stellan Skarsgård as he goes slowly round the bend because all the sunlight is doing his head in. It has a fairly ambiguous ending, and it's just a creepy, unsettling little film. Insomnia. Next on the list is another relatively modern film, Interstellar by Christopher Nolan. It is not an instant classic. I do hate that phrase that people who review films use. Nothing is an instant classic. It's an oxymoron. This is a bit silly, But if you go with it, if you go on the journey, it's a very satisfying journey. All Christopher Nolan films look beautiful, inspired by Michael Mann. Matthew McConaughey gives a good performance as an astronaut. It's about finding a new home for Earth, because we've screwed Earth up, which is obviously fact. It's a bit silly, but it's also, you kind of have to give it credit for reaching for, it maybe outstretches its grasp, or whatever that phrase is. But again, if you go with it and you let it wash into your brain, it's hugely enjoyable, and unfortunately they don't really make too many films like this nowadays. Next is another DVD. Why isn't this in Blu-ray? It's In the Line of Fire, the FBI Murders, starring Michael Gross of Tremors fame and David Soul, who was in a little cop show called Starsky and Hutch. This is one of the first HBO films, TV movie. It's based on fact. It's based on a case in Florida of two army vets, played by David Soul and Michael Gross, who just go around on a killing spree for no real purpose or no real reason. They rob banks and kill people. And this is a true story of the FBI's investigation and the tragic ending of that investigation, which then led to this being an example that's actually taught in the FBI of how not to deal with a case like this. It has kind of some trappings of a TV movie, but in the final analysis it's actually quite moving as you get to know the members of the FBI unit, and obviously it doesn't necessarily end well. David Soul and Michael Gross are fantastic. David Soul particularly plays really well against type, and if you can find it, it's a really nice little film. Well, nice is perhaps not the right word, but next is John Landis's Into the Night, which never really gets talked about as far as John Landis's back catalogue, but it's an absolute blast. It's just about Jeff Goldblum getting involved with Michelle Pfeiffer one night and having a hilarious adventure as they chase diamonds and just get involved with criminals of all sorts. And it's just one of those films that's an absolute treat. It's best watched on a Friday or Saturday night, and it's just an absolute blast. There's lots of cameos by people, and Jeff Goldblum and Michelle Pfeiffer just have wonderful chemistry, and it's one of the essential Jeff Goldblum performances, and it's just an absolute blast. This is a 101 Films release. It's a really nice print, and John Landis appears himself as a thug, which is quite amusing because they essentially take the part of the Keystone Cops. It's just a blast. It's not, it's not a masterpiece or anything, but you will have tremendous fun with it. That's Into the Night by John Landis. We're getting there. Next on the list is Into the Wild by Sean Penn. Not the biggest Sean Penn fan, but this is such a beautiful film. Again, it's based on a true story about a guy, Christopher McCandless, he said reading the box, who pretty much goes into the wild and goes up north to Alaska, just wants to learn about the world and wants just to live off the land, played by Emile Hirsch. And he meets people along the way, and yeah, I'm not going to say how it ends. It's a beautiful film. It's got a wonderful soundtrack by Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, which I highly recommend getting if you're a Pearl Jam fan. And Penn does a very clever thing, like all good artists. He doesn't judge Emile Hirsch's character. He doesn't say, oh, this is an example and this guy should be followed and we should all give up our jobs and we should all, live off the land and be one with nature. And he also doesn't say, what an idiot for going up north on his own, and he just leaves it up to you. And the final images of the film are quite moving. It's just one of those little films. Again, I think this is from the 2000s. Sorry, I can't find the date. It's either late it might have been 99 or something like that. But it is another really good modern film. I know it's stunning, but it is actually a really good modern film. That's Into the Wild. Next on the list is not a modern film. It's the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This is an Olive signature Blu-ray release, which has a lot of lovely extras. I mean, I know a lot of people like the 1977 remake, or was it 79, with Donald Sutherland and Leonard Nimoy. But I just love this one. Kevin McCarthy is absolutely fantastic. Again, it was seen as, it's about communism. It can be about what you want it to be about, essentially. It's a bit like The Thing in that sense. But it's just such a brilliant idea. It's so well done. The economy of it, the storytelling of it. I mean, it's only 80 minutes, but it rattles along. There's not a false note. It's just wonderful. It's about assimilation, and the people around you might not be who you think they are, which is obviously one of the great science fiction or horror ideas. And it's just so fantastic. It's a classic for all the right reasons. Next on the list is another classic. It's The Invisible Man. I'm weird, as you all know, and this is probably my favourite Universal Monsters. Claude Rains is fantastic in it. These Universal Monster Blu-rays I would definitely recommend picking up because the prints are just gorgeous, considering this is 1933. The special effects for 1933 still stand up, and in some ways are a hell of a lot better than the CGI we see nowadays. It's about science gone wrong and power going to somebody's head. It's a classic, and for good reason. Claude Rains is wonderful. Invisible Man. Next on the list, again, it's a bit of a departure. It's Kim Ji-woon's I Saw the Devil, which is very strong meat. It stars Lee Byung-hun and Choi Min-sik, two titans of Korean cinema. One of them's a serial killer, one of them's a cop who's tracking him down. It's just wonderful. It is quite nasty though. It is brutal. Those who are squeamish or don't particularly like violence, then it's probably not the film for you. But it's just, you can tell Kim Ji-woon is a special director. He's completely in control. He's just on top of his game here. You know, you can't go wrong with this or Bittersweet Life. I mean, they're two excellent films. And again, two great performances by two out of the three titans of Korean cinema. I Saw the Devil. Excuse me. Next on the list, again, going back in time, 1932's Island of Lost Souls. It's flawed. I think I could be wrong. This is perhaps the first version of H.G. Wells' Island of Dr. Moreau, starring Charles Laughton, who literally almost does twirl his moustache as the evil Dr. Moreau. But you can tell he's just having an absolute blast. Again, it's not perfect. It is quite creepy in places, and it still is, despite the fact it was made in 1932. This is Eureka Masters of Cinema Blu-ray, and it looks gorgeous. And if you're a Charles Laughton fan, well, you've probably got this already, but I would highly recommend it. The Island of Lost Souls, it does actually say it was originally rejected by the BBFC for being against nature. You can't have a better recommendation than that, surely. Next on the list, we're back to the modern day. It's Isle of Dogs by Wes Anderson. Again, I don't think many people like this as much as some of his other films, but I absolutely adored it. Obviously, it's no secret that I do love Japanese cinema and Japan in general, and obviously this is based on Japan in the future. It's brilliant animation. I prefer this to the Fantastic Mr. Fox. I know that's sacrilege to some people, but it's just such a lovely little film, and if you haven't seen it yet, I would highly recommend it. Isle of Dogs. Not a story about London. Next on the list, we're back to Criterion. It's Happened One Night, Frank Capra, starring Claudette Colbert and Clark Gable. And this is the blueprint for all those films where two mismatched people have to go on a road trip, and by the end of the road trip they either fall in love or they become friends. So many films have used this template, but you could argue this is still the best one. The chemistry between the two leads is fantastic. The actor who plays Claudia Colbert's father is fantastic. There's a wonderful scene where Clark Gable is teaching Colbert how to hitchhike using his 3 separate thumb techniques, all of which don't work, and then she decides to use her own technique, and she just goes to the side of the road and lifts her skirt up and shows her leg, and of course the traffic stops dead. It's just a wonderful scene. Clark Gable gets to play the heavy, gets to play the ladies' man, he gets to play pretty much everything in between. Again, if this doesn't put a smile on your face, there's something wrong, and it's still, its influence is seen. There's generally at least 2 films a year released that use this template, but this is still arguably the best one. From 1934, It Happened One Night. I mean, there's a reason that we still watch films from the 30s and 40s, because they're just better. Speaking of which, It's a Wonderful Life, again by Capra. Again, I love this film for different reasons than people in general like it. People in general think it's a Christmas film and it's a celebration of the human spirit, but it's such a dark film, and it kind of doesn't really get talked about as much, I don't think, anyway. Because it's about suicide, it's about being trapped in an existence you don't want to be in, which is certainly something that I can identify with. The idea that, if you die, all these people's lives would be changed, which, to be honest, isn't really true. If I dropped dead tomorrow, it really wouldn't matter, but that's just my opinion. It's one of James Stewart's best post-war performances. There's a moment when his brother gets off the train with his fiancée and says that he is going to go away and work in the factory of his fiancée's father. And the look in James Stewart's face when he realises he's still got to stay in the town because he wants to travel the world, he wants to see the world, and he's continually, through circumstances, being forced to stay in Bedford Falls. Excuse me. The look in Jimmy Stewart's face is just wonderful, and it does go to dark places, and it does force us to think about our lives, our impact on other people. And again, but then it's got the happy ending where, but forget the happy ending. This is a dark and depressing film, and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful life. Not that I agree with that, but... And again, going to something a little bit less wonderful as far as the life that it shows. Tarkovsky's Ivan's Childhood. This is his first film, and I don't think this gets enough love. Maybe because it's his most straightforward. Maybe it's his most narrative driven, and somehow people look down on it. It's his shortest film, but bloody hell, it's fantastic. Already you can see Tarkovsky's power of the image, his use of nature, the importance of nature. The final images are just heartbreaking, jaw-dropping. There's images in this film that other filmmakers have had long careers and have never come close to the imagery in this film. It is a simple story of, during the war, Ivan is used as a spy or a scout, and it just follows him on a couple of missions, and it's just so beautiful. You literally just could watch it in an endless loop. But again, for some reason, I still think it doesn't get the credit it deserves. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. Depressing as hell. But that's life. And that's Ivan's Childhood. And now we've just got two little film noirs to finish up. We have the wonderful I Wake Up Screaming with Victor Mature, Betty Grable, and more importantly, Laird Krieger. Again, if you've seen any of my videos, I do really love Laird Krieger, who was in The Lodger, which is the best Jack the Ripper story. Hangover Square, he was in the original Heaven Can Wait, and sadly he died very young with very few films, which is a tragedy because he was an actor who was so ahead of the game. He was doing things in those films that, it was only really until Brando started doing them. But Laird Krieger was just so ahead of his time. In this one, he plays a really creepy detective who has an obsession with the murder victim and is driven to framing Victor Mature for the killing. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. Victor Mature, who again is not my favourite actor in the world, he does okay. Betty Grable, Elisha Cook Jr. turns up, as he always does in these kind of films. But Laird Krieger is just wonderful. again, just inhabiting a character that is creepy and just wrong, but he still does it with you are still a little bit sympathetic to him. It's just another great Laird Krieger performance. And if you haven't heard of him before, which to be fair I hadn't until relatively recently, when he just blew me away in The Lodger and Hangover Square. This is a Kino Lorber Blu-ray. Highly recommend picking it up. It's just wonderful. It's kind of told in a flashback. There's a flashback within a flashback. And it's just fantastic. I wake up screaming, which I only do maybe about 4 times a week. And finally, I Walk Alone. Another film noir with Burt Lancaster, Elizabeth Scott and Kirk Douglas. Can't say fairer than that. Again, I did a random review on this one as well a while ago. It's just about a man, Burt Lancaster, comes out of prison, and he was kind of promised money by Kirk Douglas before he took the rap for a crime, and Kirk Douglas is now successful, and he comes out wanting to get his just desserts. Burt Lancaster's just furious in this film the whole time. He's just angry throughout the whole running time. And Kirk Douglas has one of his early slimy performances, and Elizabeth Scott is wonderful as always. Check out Too Late for Tears, because that's a wonderful Elizabeth Scott film noir, but that's for the letter T. So that's I Walk Alone. It's a nice little film. And that is all my eyes, so to speak. Again, please let me know in the comments below which ones of these that you've seen, which ones that I'm talking nonsense about, which films that I've completely forgotten about, or which I letter films you would recommend that I check out, because I'm sure there'll be another 50 that I have no idea about. And thanks very much for watching, and hopefully you will join me for the letter J. We're getting there. So thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. This is Soldier Ronan saying farewell.